Castorice's V4 changes are finally here, and while they don't completely shake up her kit, they do make her a stronger unit overall at every investment level, especially for those running her as a hypercarry at HoYoverse 1. There are some solid improvements that refine her playstyle, making her Dragon Summon hit harder and improving her burst damage against weakened enemies. Let's break it all down. Before we jump into the leaks, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all HSR leaks. First off, the most controversial part of her kit, the global passive, remains completely unchanged. Despite all the backlash from the community about how unfair this system is for endgame content, HoYoverse has made it clear they're not backing down. And if anything, with the recent addition of a dedicated UI for global buffs, it looks like this mechanic is here to stay, which has a lot of players concerned about the potential direction of future characters. Now, onto the actual gameplay changes. Several of Castorice's abilities have had their names adjusted. Stamen Nova has been renamed to Newbud, and Dead Dragon is now called Netherwing. These are mostly cosmetic, but it does show that Hoyo is refining the thematic presentation of her kit. Now, the buffs. One of the biggest improvements is the boost to her Dragon Summon's basic attack. The multiplier for the Claw Swipe has been increased from 24% to 40%, which is a pretty solid jump in power. While this doesn't turn the dragon into a full-on secondary carry, it does help make its damage more relevant in fights, especially for players running Castorice as their main DPS at E0. The dragon's breath skill, on the other hand, remains unchanged in terms of numbers, though the wording has been clarified to better explain its mechanics. Another interesting update is the swap between her Talent 3 and Eidolon 1. Previously, her E1 provided a stacking damage boost for her dragon's breath attack, but now that effect has been moved to her Talent 3 instead. The new T3 makes it so that every time the dragon casts Breath of Scorching Darkness, the damage increases by 30% per cast, stacking up to 6 times until the end of the round. This means that in longer fights, the dragon's AoE damage will ramp up significantly, making it much stronger in extended battles. Meanwhile, her new E1 now focuses on directly boosting Castorice's damage output against weakened enemies. When an enemy's HP falls below 80%, her key skills, including her Claws, Flames, and Darkwing's attacks, will deal 120% of their original damage. If the enemy drops below 50% HP, that multiplier jumps even higher to 140%. This is a pretty major buff for hypercarry Castorice at E1S1, since it gives her a unique multiplier to break through enemies in tough fights, especially when combined with strong supports with defense reduction or vulnerability debuffs. Speaking of hypercarry setups, Castorice now benefits more from dedicated team support. Right now, her best teammates include Tribby, Remembrance MC, and Gallagher. Tribby provides excellent buffs and offensive utility, making Castorice's overall damage much smoother. Remembrance MC is a strong support option while also offering another entity mem that lets Castorice drain and heal more. Gallagher is currently the best healer for her, as he synergizes well with her playstyle and ensures she can survive in tougher content. However, this will likely change in 3.3 when Hyacine releases, as leaks suggest she may be an even better support for Castorice, potentially replacing Gallagher in optimized teams. Finally, her light cone has received a slight buff as well. The defense ignore effect has been increased, now starting at 30% at S1 and reaching 50% at S5. This makes her overall damage more reliable, especially against tanky enemies in Memory of Chaos or other high-difficulty content. Overall, these V4 changes make Castorice a stronger hypercarry, particularly for players at HoYoverse who want to build around her. Her dragon is more relevant, her burst damage is better, and her synergy with key teammates remains strong. But despite all these improvements, the global buff system remains a major point of contention. With Hoyo refusing to remove it, there's a lot of concern about whether future characters will introduce even more powerful global effects, potentially making certain units mandatory for high-end content. So, what do you think? Are these buffs enough to convince you to pull, or do you still feel like Castorice needs more? And how do you feel about Hoyo sticking to their guns on the global buff system? Let me know in the comments.